Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kelly Starrett,
And I'm Juliet Starrett.
and you're listening to the Ready State Podcast.
You got it. You better stop it. You got it.
This episode of the Ready State Podcast is brought to you by Momentous Omega-3s.
Yeah, I want to get into this. You and I came about in the 90s, 2000s, really training, and fish oil was a thing.
We were taking like Costco fish oil though. Ugh.
Yeah, it turns out not all fish oil is the same.
Created equal.
For sure. I want to talk about the way we think about fish oil as a food, and we don't eat a lot of fish in our family. I try to go out for the tuna sashimi whenever I can, but our kids are anti-fish.
Yep.
Caroline specifically, very anti-fish.
She's very anti-fish.
She's dramatic when it comes to fish, but I've trained her in the morning because I'm the best dad ever. Hashtag. She will take an omega-3 pill from Momentous, and it doesn't. She was like, "I'm going to burp it up," and I was like, "Nope, and you won't." And I test drove that on black coffee and fish oil, which I don't need to do. I did that for you. I've tested it. But the idea is, man, we have to be getting some of these essential aspects of good nutrition in, and we don't eat a lot of fish in our family.
And what's cool is the omega-3s that are in Momentous omega-3s are the most easily absorbed in the body, which I'm sure also helps with not having fish burps after the fact.
Yeah, and we're always about like what's minimum effective dose. We're not taking massive amounts. The other thing that matters for me, third party tested. This stuff is clean, pure, doesn't have a lot of impurities, doesn't have any impurities. I mean, this is the fish oil I take for a reason.
This is good stuff. You guys should try it. Head over to thereadystate.com/momentous and use code TRS for 20% off your first purchase. This episode of the Ready State Podcast is brought to you by Chili Sleep.
Dude, we got to talk about it. We're in the middle of a heat wave when we're
It is
recording this right now.
so hot.
We just set an
It was like
all-time
113
record.
degrees where we live.
Guess who doesn't have air conditioning?
Starrettes.
That's right. We live in like a mid-century modern house that just didn't believe in air conditioning at the time.
Well, I don't think they needed air conditioning.
Well, guess why you don't need air conditioning? Because I sleep on a Dock Pro. I sleep on the greatest thing. My sheet was ice cold all night long. And guess what? I actually pulled a cover over me because I was so comfortable. This thing is a game changer.
Yeah, and it doesn't even need to be 113 degrees in a house with no air conditioning for this to be a game changer. It's really improved our sleep quality.
Yeah.
We wake up feeling better and more refreshed. This is a serious thing
Look,
in the Starrett household.
If you sleep cold, we got you covered. This thing will run warm water underneath your sheet. If you sleep hot, like most of us, not like you maniacs out there, I have had my life changed by not sweating through the bed in the night.
Seriously, it's life-changing. We can't recommend this product enough. Head on over to chilisleep.com/TRS to learn more and save off the purchase of any Cube, Uller, or Dock Pro sleep system. There's an offer available exclusively for the Ready State Podcast listeners and only for a limited time. That's Chili, CHILI, sleep.com/TRS to take advantage of our exclusive discount and wake up refreshed every day.
Because what do you do?
Just like us.
What are you afraid of? Sleep?
Being awesome. Kyla Channell holds a Master of Science degree with honors in nutrition and human performance. She wrote her thesis on training stress and menstrual dysfunction. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of California at Davis in clinical nutrition, and she's also a coach. Presently, Kyla is the owner and operator of her own nutrition consulting company called Nutritional Revolution, where she works one-on-one with clients and offers a variety of other services like recipe books and training programs for endurance and other athletes.
Yeah, this is such an important conversation because so much of what we have come to understand about performance nutrition really came out of endurance nutrition. And I feel like we went through this phase of like 90s and 2000s where it was like every gel and it was hyper precise. And then there was this revolution back towards
normal food.
Right. You must eat a hamburger while you run because it's a whole food. And all of a sudden we're realizing if you're not paying attention to some of these details when you go long, hydration, sweat loss, fueling, you can't go as fast as you want to go.
The other thing I thought was so interesting we learned right at the beginning is that there aren't that many actual programs in sports nutrition. And this is really something that these experts kind of have to learn on the job by working with athletes and studying the literature. And that's what Kyla's done.
Yeah. You and I have 2 daughters. We talk to a lot of families. There is a lot of third rails out there around being a little bit too obsessed about your nutrition, eating for body composition. But I really were refreshed because we're talking about not about like eating to lose weight, but like eating to run
performance.
a marathon as
Yeah.
fast as you
Or to
possibly
like
can.
spend 12 hours swim, bike, and running.
People don't do that. We don't get to have that conversation very much. And it's interesting how you're going to turn the dial up and turn the dial down, because I feel like people are really lost about what they need to eat to fuel.
So in full disclosure, Kyla is a dear friend of ours and member of our Failed State Bike Club. But the other thing is she's been really important in actually changing how we approach our own nutrition, especially when we go for longer bike rides, in the form of we actually eat before and during.
Intra carbs. As you'll learn, carbs are king.
Carbs are king.
This is a really great conversation. Kyla is a smarty pants. And if you walk out of this, I think you'll have some better tools to understand a little bit different framework about how and why you should eat for performance.
Enjoy our conversation with Kyla Channell. Kyla, welcome to the Ready State podcast.
Thank you guys for having me.
Okay, wait, where are you coming from? Where are you podcasting from?
I'm podcasting kind of over the hill from you guys in West Marin in a little town called Woodacre in my
That's
office,
right.
my home office.
And that's the setup, because you are a member of the Failed State Bike Club. You're one of the founding members. We ride with you. You're one of our good friends. And I want to set this up for everyone. One of the people that has highly influenced how we fuel for sport. So I just want to set this up for everyone.
I just, we'll probably repeat this like multiple times in the thing, but what I can start by saying is when I first started riding with Kyla, I would not eat anything before the ride and not eat anything during the ride. And I'd be like, I wonder why I don't feel so great, whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've learned a lot. We can talk more
Baby,
about
you felt
that.
fine. You were just slow.
I was slow. I mean,
Yeah.
and I still am
I'm just
slow,
kidding,
but anyway, so Kyla,
that slow.
welcome. We're stoked to talk to you. I just want to go really way back to the beginning, because I think it's sort of interesting. I'm not even sure Kelly knows this. Maybe he does, but, back to your childhood.
Whoa.
Your mom.
No, I don't know this. Tell me
your
more.
mom
Oh,
was like
boy.
the Marin County sheriff.
Kind of.
Okay, well, you can say about what your mom was, but I think,
Yeah.
tell us what it was like to have a mom who did what your mom did and growing up like that.
Yeah. So, my mom was the first ever female highway patrol officer in the Marin County office. And I'm sure that made her pretty tough, and that's probably why she is the way she is. So, grew up with a lot of fear, I think would probably be the best way to say it. She told me
fear for you or fear for your friends?
Probably both. Fear for my life. No, she's shared a lot of scary stuff as a child. I mean, goodness, every car accident type of crash you can imagine she was telling me about, or before I could drive, people who would kidnap children, like you name it, she drove the fear into my brain.
Is that a lingering fear, or were you able to be like, are you the most like conservative, like amazing driver? Are you kind of like, nope, I'm just gonna ride with the wind?
Yeah, I think I'm a very good driver now. I did get a speeding ticket in high school. Yes, but now I am a very good driver. No speeding. Actually, when we go on road trips, my dad actually drives significantly faster than me, which is a bit concerning. So Sid might argue that point, though, my husband.
Firefighter, but he's got the jaws of life just in his back pocket, so he's good to go.
Exactly.
Okay, so that sets us up. Juliet teases us up perfectly because you grew up in Marin, you're a kind of a local Davis grad, and you're still here. And Marin has a lot of superstar cyclists, runners, sort of outdoor athletes. How did you come to sort of understanding and occupying your role around nutrition, given that you were in the Bay Area? How did you find that and end up sort of specializing in that? Because I want to get into sort of where you came from, but I think that is an interesting piece around there was a depth of nutrition power here not too long ago, and there still is. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I think in Marin, we're just very lucky too. We have amazing grocery stores, and there's tons of local farms, out in West Marin. So we get access to a lot of amazing quality, like fresh, whole, real foods. And then there's Yeah, it is easy. So yeah, what kind of got me into nutrition was discovering that I had celiac in high school, and everything kind of made sense why I had to leave every sleepover as a child because I was in immense pain from the pizza party. So
Did you make
that
that
kind of
connection yourself, or did someone else do
Yeah,
that
like
for you?
tell us that story
That's
a
pretty
little bit. I
crazy.
mean, tell us the celiac
Yeah.
story.
So I was having just stomach pain for a while, and I didn't know celiac wasn't really a thing. That was
Oh.
back in like early 2000s, and like that was not a thing that was talked about. So I had gone to a couple gastroenterologists, and they just, they're like, it's IBS, take a probiotic, and that did not solve the issue. So eventually they ended up figuring out what was going on, and then the solution was just avoid it. Which was fun to learn and figure out, which led me into a lot of like baking and making my own food from home. Meanwhile, my dad
You're
kind of
saying in
like,
2000 there were a ton of
Yeah, I
gluten-free
mean, I just want to
options?
like set the stage here that,
Yeah.
it's like you can buy gluten-free anything now, but I
now,
mean,
yeah,
even 10 years ago, it was like, whoa, there's one gluten-free cookie on this
yeah,
weird little side aisle.
right,
But it's like when you were first diagnosed with it, there was nothing. And it
yeah,
was kind of weird. You'd be like a weirdo. You're like, what? You don't eat
yeah,
gluten?
yeah. Some people
You
still
don't eat
look at me
gluten,
as a weirdo.
but also what's gluten?
Yeah. Also, what is
Yeah.
gluten?
What is it? Yeah, I joke with people and tell them I'm not a fun person to go out to dinner with. But I feel like there are a lot of options nowadays, and it has become a lot easier. And so many
Uh-huh.
other people have other allergies.
Yeah,
So
joke's on you and Sid, your husband. You guys are both jacked and fast. Like, haha.
see what gluten did or
You're
didn't do.
super annoying. Do you feel like this, as an aside, because we'll get back to the main thing here, but do you feel like being a celiac has been hijacked by people who are like, I'm gluten intolerant? And like, do you feel like you're like, no, you
Yeah.
just shouldn't eat smash a whole pizza and drink a pitcher of beer by yourself? I
Yeah.
actually, my gut dies when I eat gluten. Do you feel like those things have
Oh
been sort
goodness.
of conflated?
I think there are a lot of people avoiding gluten, definitely that don't need to, for sure. I think it became just like a popular thing to do, kind of like going vegan at one point was very popular to do, or cutting dairy was very popular to do. It became a trend. I think if you can tolerate gluten, by all means, it could be a great part of your diet. So why not enjoy
Just you
it?
sounding so reasonable
So reasonable.
Yeah.
Can
from
I
the other
tell
side
you?
of the fence.
Can I tell you one quick celiac story about Kelly? Kelly actually diagnosed way back in the early days before anyone knew what celiac was. Our friend
Mm.
Molly, as being, or he suggested to her that she might be a celiac, and
Hmm.
she had. She was in her like mid to late 20s, I think, at that point, and
Hmm.
she had become a fine artist.
Oh,
And
wow.
after,
She was having like Hashimoto's and
yeah,
crazy
it was
stuff, and I was like,
serious.
this is like an autoimmune thing. I wonder what's
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, so Kelly said, "Go have them check and see if you're celiac," and she was. And the funny story that she always said is that, like, if I had learned as a child that I was a celiac and didn't go to school feeling horrible all the time and
Foggy.
with
Mm.
a stomach ache and foggy, she's like, I definitely would have been like an investment banker and not an
Isn't that
artist.
crazy?
Yeah,
That's
and so
yeah.
She's like, I
she
just
just
thought you eat breakfast and then you feel like shit.
yeah, she's just like,
Yeah.
because she's older than you too, so it was like everybody just ate a giant trough of like
Yeah.
Lucky Charms for breakfast, and so she would
Mhm.
eat that and then feel horrible and foggy at school, and
Charms.
so anyway, that's my
Mhm.
celiac story, and Kelly.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that origin story. I feel like there's so many times where people discover something about themselves, and you sort of become interested, and you're into cooking. What's the next step? Because you work with a lot of very high level athletes, and you have a specialty, and you're in your coaching group. How did you get to there? How did you get to college where you're like, I'm going to study nutrition, and then kind of back into where you are now?
Yeah. I mean, nutrition became of interest for sure with the celiac thing. And then I played basketball in high school and had anemia, and that was a big game changer. And
Mm.
also learned a bit about electrolytes. I look back and realize it now. My dad was having me drink pickle juice when I would play basketball. Maybe electrolytes weren't as popular then. I don't even know. But it made a big difference, when you're actually hydrated. So, and then, he got me into mountain biking when I was in high school. And you just kind of, I think a lot of my nutrition desires and schooling there was really just biased, like self interest 100%. Like I wanted to learn more about how to help me and help me be healthy, and what are things I can do to live a longer, healthier life and well fueled and support the sports I want to do. And I got into Davis and did, at the time, it was a clinical dietetics program was what was offered. So sports nutrition was not much of a thing, honestly, at the time. Like, it's even hard to find a sports nutrition undergrad or master's program now. At the time, the kind of workaround was to do a double major in clinical and then kinesiology. And then it was up to you to kind of put those pieces together. But in your nutrition courses, you never learned about sport. It was all, how do you set up these specific ratios for a tube feeding patient in a hospital? Or, it was
Right.
very
Not about
different.
Yeah,
performance,
not
it's
like
about
how do you
disease.
fuel for a 5-hour,
Right.
triathlon or something, and how
Yeah.
and when and what do you eat? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So in the clinical dietetics program, the requirement is to do 3 different internships. It's a community nutrition, food service management, and a clinical nutrition internship. And so I did all 3 of those. And then there was a internship offered by Dr. Liz Applegate, who ran the whole D1 sports nutrition at Davis, for a sports nutrition internship on campus with the athletes, and it was not required and it wasn't as well known, and I applied to it and did it, and I absolutely fell in love. I When I did my clinical nutrition at the hospital, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm so happy I did it, because I knew right then and there I like never wanted to go down that path, as harsh as that sounds, but like, it's one of those things that was a big eye opener for me, where I knew I didn't want to go that direction. And then when you get to do the sports nutrition stuff, I just like everything kind of clicked. And fell in love. And then after Davis, I got to work with Dr. Stacy Sims when she was still at Osmo, and she really took me under her wing. I actually was going back and forth from Davis. Well, I'd come home on the weekends and coach CrossFit, and Stacy was one of my CrossFit clients. So she just pulled me under her wing and taught me opened my eyes to the whole sex differences in sport stuff, which was really neat. And trained me to take over her position at Purple Patch, working with athletes, and then started my own private practice, went to grad school, did all that fun stuff. So, and here I am today.
Okay, so private practice is not what I would have thought of when you describe your business, but I mean, I guess that's what it is. But but tell us what it is. It's called Nutritional Revolution.
Yes.
I think of you more as like an entrepreneur nutritionist than a private practitioner. But yeah, tell us.
No, I'm a private practitioner.
Yeah.
In the same way that you are, but
Yeah.
that's super weird. I would never describe myself that way either.
Yeah,
I'm with
no.
you.
So tell us about the company, and what you do and who do you serve and what's going on.
Yeah. So company, like you said, it's Nutritional Revolution, and started by me in the beginning days, working with athletes, and it kind of evolved from the Purple Patch situation. So when I was working at Purple Patch, I was working solely they primarily focus on Ironman athletes. So a lot of like long distance endurance, nutrition and hydration programming. And then I started my own Nutritional Revolution to help people who are non-Purple Patch athletes. And that's just kind of grown and continue to work with primarily endurance athletes, runners, gravel cyclists, Ironman, you name it, runners, all kinds of stuff, even ultra runners. We get some fun, like unique sports, like tactical athletes every once in a while. But yeah, primarily work on whether it's day-to-day nutrition, if it's specific like sweat testing and gut training. We might do race build, so breaking down their requirements for certain durations in heat and humidity and what those requirements are. So lots of math.
I'm going to play dumb here for a second. But is it that specific? Can hydration and nutrition, because I think about the average person. Like, I go to the gym, I work out. Do I need? I mean, besides really trying to dial in body composition and quality, for sure. I mean, does that aspect of nutrition really matter at the highest levels for folks? Because I feel like, I'm just good enough. I did my CrossFit workout. I eat some
Yeah.
food. I don't really need to do differently in my CrossFit programming, do I? And does nutrition make a big difference towards these these longer durations?
I would say 100% nutrition and hydration makes a difference. You will not finish if you do not program your nutrition and hydration accordingly. I mean, some of these people are out on course for 12 hours. And when we learn about their sweat losses, some of these people are losing like 86 ounces an hour. So if you
An
think about
hour.
that times 12, like if you're not getting some fluids in you, you're,
A vampire
yeah,
who
yeah,
hasn't eaten another human being in a long time.
So,
yeah.
Kyla, what does it look like for one of these? Like, I mean, like maybe just give us some snapshot of like some athlete who's going to do like a 5-hour triathlon, or I don't know, you
Mhm.
choose the time. But what does that actually look like? Like, what are you advising their eating and drinking? I realize it's individualized because again, you're measuring things like sweat loss, and
Mhm.
everybody has different body composition. But like, just generally speaking, like. And the reason I bring this up is I think people need
because
to be
Juliet and I are
eating
the
and
same size and we need to eat and drink the
yeah, I
same
mean, I
amount.
think I think generally speaking, those kinds of athletes, in order to perform at the level they are eating and drinking way more than people realize.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Could you give
Yeah.
like a day in the life of the race of a endurance
Yeah.
athlete eating and drinking?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was just building a race plan, but right before I hopped on the podcast with you guys. So one of my clients, he is an older male. He's doing Maple Valley 70.3. So that's a half Ironman distance. And he is going to be,
Just a half
yeah,
Ironman.
just a
I
half
see.
Ironman. And
So lazy.
he's in his 60s, by the way. Yeah. Like I'm
Awesome.
constantly impressed by my clients. Like they're so inspiring. And like calculate out what his time will be in each event. So it starts with a swim, you go to the bike, and then you finish with a run. And he guesstimated he would be swimming for an hour, on the bike for 3.5 hours, and running for 2.5 hours. And then we have to account for transition times and things like that. So he's not going to be eating or drinking while he's swimming. So we have to account for getting those fluids and that nutrition in him on the bike and in the run. Many times with endurance athletes like this, the run is a harder place for people to definitely have a desire to drink, but just more prone to GI issues just with the stomach
And
jostling
let me
and
just go
stuff.
saying, I ran one race ever that was like I did the quad dipsy. Let me
Oh,
just tell you how
nice.
fun it is to eat anything or drink
Yeah.
anything when you're
No.
jogging,
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
much less racing. Like, I don't
Yeah.
race. I was surviving and I was like, I don't think I'm going to eat on this one.
Yes.
Nope,
Yeah.
I'm done drinking today.
That's my I told Sid that's the reason why I want to become a gravel biker with Juliet, so we can just stop at all the coffee shops and eat all the pastries, get all the coffee. But
Cappuccino and
yeah,
pastries.
yeah. The gluten-free pastries. So with something like that, we've had this client sweat test and
What does
in
that mean?
multiple. So the simplest explanation or way to sweat test is hopping on a scale immediately before you start your training session, going for your training session, and then hopping on the scale immediately after your training session to assess for weight loss.
And
You
that's
do want
even
to,
like I'm drinking, I'm doing my normal thing.
yeah. So if you are drinking, say it's a session, maybe he went for a 2-hour bike ride that we're sweat testing for, you do want to account for, and we basically add back in, we have a whole like calculator equation system where we will account for fluids coming in. So he was hydrating during, and then if we want to get nitty gritty about it, we can even weigh foods that he consumed and come back and weigh the empty wrappers if you get super detailed with it, to assess fluid losses in certain environments. So we can then go back and say, okay, when client X was sweat testing in 55 degrees, he was losing 18 ounces an hour. And then when he switched up and started sweat testing in 85 degrees, his sweat rate went all the way up to 45 ounces an hour. And so then we have a reference range to
45
look back
ounces.
on.
Are those actual numbers that you've seen before? Because I think if someone is like, wow, a soda pop is 12 ounces and I lost 4 cans of soda pop in an hour, is that a reasonable amount of sweat loss?
That's actually
That's not a made up
low.
number.
That's
Oh,
not that's like a moderate. Yeah. So, I just had to do a bunch of stuff to pull together for a hydration podcast I did. And one of the things we were looking at in the literature is like the common rate of loss is 1 to 2 they put in the metrics the metric system. So 1 to 2 liters per hour. So that's 33 to 67 ounces per hour is the like normal, more common place to be, up to 4 liters per hour. They
So
see
if I
in
was
some
like
athletes.
if my name happened to rhyme with Nellie Arnett, you're saying that I might need to drink a lot more on
I think maybe that you and I don't need to bring the same amount of water bottles on our bike
I
rides.
don't think we do.
Yeah.
What food is a really tricky subject out there right now.
Yeah.
I have seen you really, you're one of our good friends. I have coached you for what feels like a long time. I see you talking about eating whole foods whenever you can, because I think
Yeah.
when people think endurance, like I'm not sure I've ever seen you eat a gel or a goo when we're riding. I don't know if that's true or not. I think it is. I haven't seen one.
Yeah.
But you really have been a proponent towards whole foods. Can people do these races, or do they need to be like, oh, I'm going to go run a 10K. I immediately adapt to the drinking this sugar paste. Do I have to do that in order to do these things?
Yeah, that's tricky. I mean, I would say like the more recreational athlete likely no. I think when you start getting to a higher level of performance, like the competitiveness is very serious. It might be more in your favor to rely a little bit on the simpler stuff. But for our failed state bike club rides, like we're stopping and chatting, and so relying on like a quick sugar digesting thing just I don't feel is necessary for something like that. If I were out doing maybe interval work, something like that, I might bring along something like that, like a quick digesting gel. But I think you can get away with using more real food stuff. Where you can start to get in trouble is there's some things that will just slow gastric emptying. And so if an athlete
What does that mean? What's gastric emptying?
So how fast something empties out of your stomach into the small intestine.
Why does that matter?
So if anybody's listening to this has noticed burping, vomiting, stomach sloshing, diarrhea, any of that stuff when they're...
You're saying that's bad.
Yeah, that's not fun. It's not fun.
No one wants to have
The reason I mention
diarrhea.
is that
No one
happens.
wants to have
that
diarrhea when
happens
they're running a
all
marathon.
the time. Like
It does.
people feel terrible when they fuel and they go long or up their intensity. I mean, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
You even hinted at gut training.
Mhm.
Can you talk about what that means just a second? Because I want you to come back to this. But you said gut training earlier, and I was like, ooh, gut training.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do gut training with cookies every night.
There you go. Exactly. So gut training is a little bit newer, I would say, kind of area that's being a bit more publicized. But just as an example, there are Tour de France athletes consuming 120 grams of carbohydrates per hour while they're racing. So for a really long time, there was this kind of take away from the research that you could not consume more than 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. And then what we realized is they were only what's that?
That's just a really clean number, not 61, 60.
Yeah.
All humans are the same.
Exactly. Yeah. They determined 1 gram of carbohydrate per minute is what the research showed. And what they realized then is that they were only looking at one type of sugar, which is glucose. And it did seem that, in fact, glucose kind of tapped out at 60 grams per hour. So then research started to look at combining 2 types of sugars. And the common mix is a little bit of fructose and the 60 grams of glucose. So they'll do a 2-to-1 is most common, 30 grams of fructose, 60 grams of glucose to tap out at 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour, because fructose utilizes a different intestinal transporter to get into our system. So basically they were saying that the glucose molecules kind of backed up, tapped out, filled up all the sodium glucose transporters, and then you would need a different sugar to come in to then continue to get more energy to exceed 60 grams of carbs per hour. What we're seeing now is that you can, in fact, gut train. So you can train the gut to tolerate and absorb more than 60 grams, more than 90 grams of carbohydrates per
Girl, I
hour.
could have told you this. Like, you should just put down a whole bunch of George's cookies. I can
Yeah.
I can way exceed 100 grams an hour.
Except for you're putting down George's cookies and then
Yeah.
sitting on the couch.
That's because that's the only thing I
Yeah.
can do.
Yeah. This is
This is a different kind of gut
run a
training, Kelly.
marathon?
This
No,
is a
okay,
different kind of
okay.
gut training.
This is strictly in reference to consumption in a state of exertion. So yeah, you can easily consume, I'm sure, take down more than 120 grams when you're chilling on the couch, right? But in a state of exertion, there's decreased blood flow to the gut, so it can just increase the likelihood of GI distress or irritation. And so when we gut train, and gut train consists of kind of like slowly increasing your carbohydrate intake per hour in your training sessions. Ideally, these are training sessions that represent some or include some like race pace intervals or something like that. So it simulates the race as best as we can. And you're consuming these carbohydrates and you're just increasing incrementally up a little bit each week. And in doing that, we see that you can do three things. You can increase how quickly the stomach empties into the small intestine. So you're not leaving the food sitting around in the stomach, which can lead to like burping is one thing, vomiting for sure, nausea if it's hanging out there too long. And then emptying out of the stomach is cool, but we want to make sure we actually absorb it out of the small intestine. So the next thing that can happen when we gut train is we can actually increase the amount of carbohydrate receptors that are lining the small intestine to then pull those carbohydrates out rapidly and then actually be put into the bloodstream and used as energy. So those two things are really important. And then the third thing is we can decrease just the perception of gut discomfort over multiple gut training sessions. So that's usually what we're aiming for when we're gut training.
Oh, by the way, this doesn't sound fun at all. I mean,
yeah, I was like, I don't really want.
Eat
Okay,
this sandwich.
So
now
I just
eat a
want to
little
go
more.
back. I want to go back to our like 60-year-old triathlete guy. So you've sweat tested him. So you're gonna make sure that he drinks per hour the right amount of fluids to replace or exceed that. And then like, what's he actually like? What's the guy gonna eat? Like, what's he gonna be eating during this thing?
Yeah. So this client in particular, I'll just give this as reference, but I will say many clients are very different. I always check with them and what products they want to use. And then based off of the sweat test data, we may tweak things when we actually find out sweat sodium concentration. So many times there are gels out there or products out there where they're meant to be a fuel source, more so a fuel source because they're very carbohydrate dominant. But when you actually look at the sodium content, it is very low. And everyone is so unique in their sweat losses and fluid losses and sodium concentration within their sweat. So I highly suggest doing that. But for this individual, he's actually using, do you want me to say product names?
Sure.
That's fine.
Okay. He's using Tailwind, which is a liquid carbohydrate and electrolyte formula in addition to goo gels. And so this is something he's used for a long time. His gut's very used to it. He actually has never had any GI issues. He's one of my very lucky clients in that manner. And he's consuming 114 grams of carbohydrates per hour in that combo. So he's doing 1.5 servings of his Tailwind per hour plus 3 goos an hour. So about every 20 minutes, he's taking down a gel. And along with that, he's sipping his Tailwind product.
So can I
because he's going out for 6 or 7 hours.
Yeah.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah. And I'm saying, so, obviously like a recreational athlete wouldn't need to be eating that much per hour. But like, what would that look like? Because we're talking about goos and you're talking about something that you're putting inside his water bottle, the Tailwind stuff. But like, if you were to turn that into like food that people could relate to, like, is that like 3 Go macro bars that he's eating per hour? Like relate it to some kind of food that people understand what it is. Like what's, like how much, just to explain.
Yeah. So just, so for some fast math. So 114 grams of carbs per hour is equivalent to roughly almost 6 bananas an hour. Just like for reference.
See, that's helpful. Yeah. That's really helpful to know.
Yeah.
Dude, the 2 banana club is my jam. Can I eat 2 bananas in a single setting? Like, I feel like when I'm feeling dangerous, but 6 bananas an hour.
Do you think you could do it? Do you think you could actually do it?
Let me ask you this. One of the things that we've seen is that Stacy is like a great friend of ours, Dr. Sims. I have aimed her at some serious people before. I know that you all are experts in this. one of the things that I have perceived is that parents especially think, well, hey, performance hydration nutrition, especially as we go for performance endurance sports, not I'm going for a hike and I'm just going to keep my heart rate at 135 for the next 6 hours. That's a different fueling need.
Mhm.
They have taken those precepts and aimed them back at their kids for a, 20-minute event or a single soccer game. And there's real
Yeah.
confusion there. Could you shed some light on, like, if Juliet and I are going for an hour bike ride, what
Mhm.
do I need to eat? Do I need to eat?
Yeah,
How
that's
should
a
I
good
Yeah,
think about
like
that?
like a CrossFit, like a whatever CrossFit, or just some kind of like you go to like a 1 hour fitness class or a
Mhm.
1 hour bike
Or
ride. Like
do I need to worry about my kids playing a water polo game? Like what's your sweat loss and choke this down? I mean,
Yeah.
are those things different?
Yes and no. I mean, I do work with some high school athletes, specifically swimmers and water polo players, and there are some of them that are putting in more hours a day than my Ironman athletes. So in those situations, they need to eat like it's their job, which is
Do you think?
wild.
Let me stop in there. Do you think that that's like different than performance nutrition? Like they're
Mhm.
smashing gels and drinking calories
Mm,
versus chronically under eating, which is one of the things that we see massively. We
yeah.
were just talking to a whole bunch of families of boys who are athletes, swimmers, water polo players, and they're like, boys are talking about gaining weight, and we're like, you're barely eating what you need to
Yeah.
maintain your current body weight. You're losing weight during the season, like gain weight.
Mhm.
Like you think it's a joke. Like
Yeah.
you're not even eating enough food to cover
Yeah.
your basic nutrition needs.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is really common. I see that with high school athletes as well as adults in sport. I think that there is some underfueling that can be going on for sure, just outside of training, definitely in training as well. But yeah, I've seen that. And I particularly so not enough carbohydrates. There's such a carbohydrate fear. And I
Yeah,
think
carbs
when
make you
I
fat, bro. Everyone knows that.
exactly, right? So I
Just
think when
kidding, everyone. Lisa
yeah,
just checked her watch. She's
yeah.
noting the time when that's when the internet goes belly.
cut, cut that out. No, I mean, I think when probably when I'm saying carbs, people are picturing like Starbucks muffins and popsicles and
Yeah.
cake and stuff like that. But carbohydrates are also beans and rice and sweet potato. There's more micronutrient dense ways to get in carbohydrates as well. And you don't need to be afraid of those things. And actually, they're hugely beneficial to performance and definitely endurance performance as well.
Hey guys, we just want to take a little break in this podcast episode to actually tell you about one of our own products, and that's our Ready State Virtual Mobility Coach.
Yeah, the app literally is the first place you should go if you're trying to feel better, if you're trying to solve an old movement related problem, if you're just trying to not be as sore from your workout.
There is so much going on in this app. We have a mobility test that is comprehensive and designed by Kelly Starrett himself.
It's pretty good.
So you can figure out what your biggest limitations are and start to work on that. There are sport specific mobilizations if you want to try to lift more or run faster. There is a pain area. And we even have a ton of bonus content. You can do challenges around squat and ankle and a bunch of other specific body parts, so you can just generally get more supple
You're
and
killing
awesome.
it. You should talk about this app more often. Look, we started the Original Mobility Project back in 2010 trying to help people solve problems for themselves. We think that every human being should be able to perform basic maintenance on themselves. And we want you to be able to engage in some self-care in a really reasonable, responsible way. One of our favorite parts of it, daily mobility. You have a 10, 20, or 30-minute follow along with me. If you just have a ball and a roller, think you want to feel better, move better, play along. I mean, we really feel like that's the base camp practice. Then you can add in what you need.
We're really proud of this and what we've created here, and we think you should give it a try.
Fact.
Head on over to thereadystate.com/trial and use code POD20 for 20% off your first month. And just FYI, including your 2-week free trial, that's literally 6 weeks for $11.99. You can't beat that. There's so much amazing content to help you feel better and move better for $11.99.
For in the words of our podcast producer, bananas.
So, Kyla, I know that your primary clientele are these serious people who need these like very specific nutrition plans. But I also know, since you're my friend, that you work with some normal people, including, some kids, like you said,
Mhm.
um, and not just athletes, but also some kids who are struggling with eating disorders.
Mhm.
Um, and there's two things that I've learned from you. One of them is low energy availability, which I think is a huge problem, especially in female youth athletes. And
Mhm.
then I'd never heard of it before. In fact, I was just telling Kelly about it the other day, a term called orthorexia, which I
Mm.
have to think is gigantically huge, especially in a
Mhm.
place like Marin, where people are so active and it's always easy to sort of hide behind your health habits,
Mhm.
um, even if
Yeah,
they're
break those two
unhealthy.
things
So,
down.
yeah, could you break those down? Like, what are those and what are you seeing?
Yeah, so the first one you said was LEA, right? Low energy availability. That's that term actually has evolved a little bit into red. Well, there's a couple terminologies. The first, it was female athlete triad, which was, we know that that is one thing, but also low energy availability isn't solely prominent in females. Men can have low energy availability as well. And so the term has changed a little bit to red S, or relative energy deficiency in sport. And it is kind of what it sounds like. I mean, they're not eating enough food, and sometimes that can be totally unintentional because of lack of appetite. So, for example, runners like tend to get a lack of appetite post training, and sometimes it's really hard to actually get them to eat some recovery nutrition right away, and it takes a while. And that has to do with just elevations and fight or flight hormones and lack of blood flow to the gut and stuff like that. And then orthorexia, that's
This
a
is why I
little
don't
bit,
run, everybody, because if
yeah,
running
because
made me
then you
not
wouldn't be able
hungry,
to eat.
Yeah, you're like,
I'm
no,
out.
thank you.
This is
Yeah,
crap.
exactly. And then orthorexia is a bit more of, it can be kind of like an obsession with like clean eating too. So like only eating organic, or only eating vegetables, or not, like they have to be able to read the label. There can be a bit of an obsession there. And that is something, interestingly enough, I have seen that in a handful of my Ironman athletes. I think I find that a lot of them are very type A, and they want to do things right. And they think eating loads and loads and loads of veggies is the right way to go, which, yes, we need those. But what ends up happening is they get so full off of veggies that they're not actually getting anywhere near their carbohydrate target to fuel the hours and hours and hours that they're putting in of training per day. And it can set them up in these states of relative energy deficiency, or low energy availability. And when we don't have enough energy circulating around our body to help us do the things we want to do, the body's going to start kind of cutting costs, if you will, in areas that it can. And that might be not allocating as much energy to building your bones up. It might be not allocating as much energy into your sex hormones. So we see women that are losing menstrual cycles, or we'll see men with low testosterone. So the body's really smart, and it wants you to survive. So it's going to cut costs from somewhere. And it's a little bit different for everybody, but definitely common areas are, bone mineral density. We see a lot of increased injuries, fractures, stuff like that. And then loss of menstrual cycle in our female clients,
If
unfortunately.
I'm trying to if I'm trying to fuel for performance, because I feel like every diet out there or every eating regimen is all geared towards calorie restriction or
Mm-hmm.
being in an energy deficit or caloric deficit, right? Like whether it's keto or intermittent fasting, people are trying to change their body composition. How
Mm-hmm.
much body composition work do you do? Or do you find those things are really at odds that, hey, we're going to be fueling for performance, and also, Kelly, you're too fat on the bike and we need to change something like that? Do you do that kind of thing too? Because I feel like that has just muddied the water. Everyone's like, I'm too
Mm-hmm.
fat for Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, by the way, you're eating eating like a way that you're going to go slow the rest of your life. Are you
Yeah.
finding that to be an issue?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things we have to educate our clients on quite often is when there is a weight loss goal or a body recompositioning goal, that timing that accordingly with where their races fall is really important. Because especially if the goal is weight loss, many times the things we need to do with nutrition are going to be almost opposite of what we want to do if the goal is performance. And so I think many times people, they want all the things, right? They want good performance. They want to lose weight. They want body recompositioning, but we can't support performance when we put you in a caloric deficit to achieve weight loss. And so it's timing those things accordingly and being comfortable with switching throughout the season. So we may, in the early phases or off season, those are great times to like work on body recompositioning when your goal is not performance, for sure. And then when the goal is performance, we need to up your intake and your carbs and shift some things around to support that. So
when you
Amazing.
get you see obviously a lot of new clients, but and maybe one of them is that they should, maybe I'm going to answer it myself, is that they shouldn't fear carbs. But in this world where there is still a massive amount of nutrition information and confusion, and nobody knows whether they should fast or not fast, or do keto or be a vegan,
Cereals are dangerous.
whatever, is there one kind of like big, like what's the big misconception? Like what are people coming knocking on your door that you're having to constantly debunk?
And remember, everyone, listeners, Kyla is coming from a performance nutrition perspective. You can talk to all of these different things, but that's the lens we want you to be working with.
Yeah.
Right?
Like what's the biggest, what are you, like what's the biggest misconception that you
yeah,
have to sort of combat with your clientele?
I think, probably the most common thing we see and have to combat is the fear of carbohydrates. And we see time and time again in the literature that carbs are king. I'll say that. But like carbs do always outperform or support performance better than they've done studies, looking at like ketones or, mixtures of even including protein or amino acids, and carbohydrates always win. And so that is something where many times when we start doing the calculations based off of the literature of what some of these athletes need, it's a big kind of shock and eye opener to them of how much I would like to see them hitting, or how much they might need prior to a training session or even during a session.
Fast. You're telling me I actually have to eat this much? I can't do it. Sorry.
Yes. But once they do it, it's so neat because immediately you hear from them and they're like, I felt so much better. I could go so much further in my run. Or you hear that stuff and it's, their recovery's better and they're not as fatigued or craving chips and popcorn and pretzels later in the day because they hit and replenish their glycogen following their training sessions and didn't fully deplete themselves. So yeah, carbohydrates.
I still think I could do better, Kyla, because I've only gone so far as eating before we ride.
Yeah.
Usually some protein and oats.
Nice.
And then sometimes I'll have like half a bar.
Okay.
You're not throwing it down. I think you're
You think that's
in
fine?
my
Do you think that's
non-expert
fine?
advice,
How am I doing?
you're doing so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm improving.
Yeah, you are. What was Carolyn was eating? Like, was she eating some like
She had a
sausage or
sausage.
something? Yeah.
You're like, I'm not sure that's what you, when your fire is really
well,
hot.
we have,
throwing a
just
sausage in
for
there.
context, we have a German woman who joins our bike clubs and literally has shown up with like a pocket of like bratwurst.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Okay. One of the things I think is really confusing for people is water. And like hydration is like hydrate or die. I think the pendulum has swung back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You are really advocating for this idea of like, hey, you're losing all this water when you're in sweat, when you're exercising, and you're not really paying attention to that. And you can get away with that for an hour or so. You can't get away with it for a lot longer. One of the things I'll add on to that is that we have heard, hey, whenever you can, don't drink your calories. Do you still ascribe to that generally?
I think there's really an exception to like everything. It's hard to say and generalize.
I'm a working dad who doesn't want to get fat. Should I drink my calories?
I would say probably not. Probably not. Okay. Yeah.
I'm now, my heart rate is 180 for the next 3 hours, which is impossible, but let's just pretend it was. Probably not going to be able to chew a sandwich while I'm racing fast, right?
Yeah.
Is that a good example of why I might need to supplement with calories?
Yeah. And the other place I see that it can be really helpful is honestly with my athletes who do lose their appetite post-training. I tell them I'd rather see them get in something than nothing in that post-training window. And so if they prefer to rely on a liquid recovery source, whether that's a smoothie with some Greek yogurt in it, or if it's a simpler protein powder with some powdered carbohydrates, like I will take that. Like if they can get that in and start that recovery process and glycogen replenishment when glycogen synthase is elevated, I want them doing that rather than nothing at all.
One of the things that we talked about briefly in your sleuthing of trying to understand the neighborhood, because this is something I do as a clinician, like people come in and I'm like, okay, you're telling me this one little hyper local idea, but I sort of need to understand what a bigger picture is. Do you feel like people really are super nerdy and like love to track this stuff, and then the rest of the meals and the rest of the day is less important in their brains? How much do you have to be like, hey, you're talking about going faster in this 10K or this half Ironman or whatever, and you don't eat breakfast? Does that happen a lot to you?
It does. I think what we see is people will oftentimes eat the same thing for breakfast or throughout the whole day. On a day they do nothing, and they'll eat the exact same thing on a day they go for a 6-hour bike ride. And that does not, that needs to change. They need to, increase intake a bit more leading up to that 6-hour bike ride. They need to consume obviously nutrition during that bike ride, and they need to hit the energy intake pretty hard after that 6-hour bike ride. So yeah, they need to shift the nutrition a bit and kind of find a routine that can work to support different levels of output is what we're trying to kind of educate our clients on.
So I have this really, really close friend who's just trying to do this 24-hour ride. And this is the first time in his life he's ever gone long. And it's like he's a baby learning to stand for the first time in terms of like eating. And he's like, look, I ate some oats before my bike ride and then ate 200 calories an hour. And I'm like, you're a 230-pound man and you just rode for 6 hours.
Yeah.
You may be under fueling a little bit. How would someone begin to understand how many calories? So it's not a race, but it is going to be long. Like say that Juliet and I are doing some long through hike or something. How would I begin to know what a rough guideline is for what I should eat every hour based on continuous output, right?
Yeah.
I'm not just saying, I just, we're doing a hike and we're not elite, we're middle-aged people and we can just eat meals. But when someone's going to do that for the first time, are there basic guidelines or fence posts for them?
For you?
Not me.
Not you. Okay. Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about hiking, if you're carrying a pack, if you're at altitude, those are things where your hydration and your carbohydrate intake is going to be slightly greater than maybe if you were here at sea level walking around the block, for sure. And for continuous effort, you do want to minimize the glycogen depletion as best as you can. That otherwise you're gonna bonk. You're gonna hit the wall eventually. And so if we can delay that by keeping some nutrition coming in, I think it depends on your effort. So how hard are you breathing? Is it a conversational pace? If you're not able to have a conversation, you're pushing really hard consistently and you're breathing really hard, you're likely going to want to lean more towards carbohydrates as your primary fuel source. And then if you are walking and you can have a conversation, you might tolerate definitely a lower caloric level, but probably a combination of, some carbohydrates, fats, and protein. And that could be something like a Go Macro bar.
How many calories an hour? Is there a rough guideline?
Yeah,
because I feel like it's really people just don't like we just see people eating way too much on the trail. We're like, hold up.
Yeah.
People who are
undereating.
Yeah, they're undereating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's hard. From a hiking perspective, I can't think of any
hiking. I want to ride my bike for this long period of time. Juliet and I are going for a big bike ride.
If pace is, easy, a minimum would be 30 grams of carbs per hour, which is equivalent.
Even your easy pace is not my easy pace. Yeah. It's a hard pace for me.
But then if you start pushing and you're going to be out there longer, then the recommendations kind of shift and say like aim for 60-ish grams of carbs per hour. And then if you're going to be out there 3+ hours, then we're looking at, and it's a hard push. So think of 90 grams of carbs per hour. So that's kind of where you can try and be. And those suggestions too are based on, did you glycogen load leading up to that? because even when you glycogen load and you saturate the muscle with carbohydrates, you can still completely knock those out in 90 minutes all out effort. So it's something to keep in mind. You can deplete those stores pretty rapidly.
So basically what you're saying is if I eat like a giant bowl of oats and then I blow myself out in 90 minutes, I'm completely depleted. Like totally.
You could
No.
be. You could be.
Can't work that hard.
I'm too old to work that hard, but I mean,
But yeah.
theoretically, Kyla.
Theoretically,
91 minutes for you, Jake. You're the shiz.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kyla, I want to just shift since we're running out of time here. One of the things that you and I talk a ton about actually on our bike rides is what it's like to be an entrepreneur and small business owner. And I mean, I know you think of yourself as in private practice, but what I see you as is running a small business because you have employees and people working for you and websites and all the challenges that go with running a small business. But, this is sort of a twofold question. Like, what surprised you the most about running your own business, and what have been the biggest challenges?
Oh my goodness. Well, you've been my business mentor for sure. I bring all my questions
So
to
say
you.
we all.
Yeah. But oh goodness. I mean, tax season is always a fun surprise, when they like to knock you there, which is always fun. But oh goodness. I mean, all of it was such a learning curve. I mean, just everything from like having to register your business name and going to the Marin County Civic Center to register that and posting it in the newspaper. It's all just like all that stuff was self-learned, I guess. And yeah, and then bringing on employees was a whole nother thing of like trying to figure out how that all works with registering as an S corp and doing all of that stuff was all. I mean, it's consistently a learning curve. It will forever be, I think.
Is it better working for yourself, or is it easier to work for someone else?
I personally love working for myself. I think it's great. And especially with Sid's schedule, my husband's schedule as a firefighter, we can coordinate stuff definitely easier. I'm in control of my schedule, which is nice. My calendar when people can book. So that's always really nice. Definitely. I do like that.
Where do you feel like trends are going in this space? One of our friends we interviewed a long time ago said that when you got a nutrition coach, it felt like you were turning pro. And we're seeing more and more people working with outside nutrition coaches and it being a real turning point in their performance.
Yeah.
When would I need to do that as a person? Could you give me some examples when I might seek out someone like you as a performance nutrition coach?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. My answer to that honestly is when you're ready to make a change, because it's going to be a change. And we see plenty of clients come to us that I think they want us to make the change for them. They want the information, but they're not ready to apply it whatsoever. And yeah, you need to be ready and willing to make the change. Like I'm here to give them all the information under the sun, but they are the ones essentially that do have to make that change and make that initiative. I'm not the one who's there doing their grocery shopping or cutting up their veggies, or putting together the recovery shake. They need to be the ones that are responsible for that. And if they're not ready to take that on or find ways to implement that into their life, they don't have time for it, then it's likely they're just not ready for it yet,
I do think it's a positive trend in the space, though, that there is so many more accessible nutrition coaches out there because it's such a challenge for so many people. And, people haven't for years batted an eyelash about being like, well, I need personal training, so I'm going to hire a personal trainer, or, or I'm going to run a marathon, so I'm going to hire a marathon coach. And it does seem to be a more recent thing where people are like, oh, nutrition is actually complicated. And, whether I'm trying to change my body composition or try to perform in a sport, like it's super complicated. Actually, I should hire an expert for this. It seems like we've really sort of made a shift culturally that people are more open to it.
We would do these body composition challenges because you just found some photos from back in the day.
Oh my gosh.
And people kept food logs. We just were like, hey, you should just, what do you even know what you're eating? And when people would reflect back sometimes and share, they're like, well, I had a really bad day, so I ate a bag of
Mm.
peppermint patties. And we're like, and
Mhm.
what else? And they're like, no, that's it, because I felt so bad about eating peppermint patties. I stopped eating. So
Right.
we're like, you ate a bag of peppermint patties today. That was what you ate. And we're like,
Yeah.
okay, so what the hell do you think is happening to you? I mean, it's kind of crazy when we forget some of the real, you're talking
Mhm.
about nutrient timing and food quality and what to fuel with. But man, people are just swimming out there, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. We have seen that. The binge and repeat, and then the kind of the shame and the guilt, like that's an unfortunate cycle that needs to be, worked through for sure with a professional, definitely, to get, I mean, you need to get nutrition, micronutrients in your diet. You're not going to get those from peppermint patties, unfortunately.
No.
How many peppermint patties hit my RDA of vitamin C? There's
Yeah.
got to be
By
a
the way,
number.
can I just?
There's a number.
I'm going to wrap this up, but I have to tell you a funny story that when the fat-free diet was like all the rage in the 90s when
Oh my
Kelly was
goodness.
coming of age,
Yeah.
and we would all buy these giant tubs of red vines at Costco because
Fat-free.
they were fat-free. And so you're like, yes, I can
Oh
eat
my
like
goodness.
a million red vines because they're
Yeah.
fat-free. So, but Kelly and his friend Shane couldn't read the nutrition label, and they thought there was 10 grams of
We
protein.
were in college.
They thought there was 10 grams of protein per 10.
No. Well, like every like red vine we thought had a gram protein.
Had a gram.
And so if we're driving across the country from Colorado to like Tennessee to race, we'd be like, "Heck, I just had 10 grams of protein."
Oh
and
my
then we
gosh.
realized it was like 10 red vines
for
is
1 gram.
one serving.
Oh
And
my
I was like,
God.
I think I have diabetes. I think I feel sick.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
I'm still hitting my protein macros. Anyway,
Yeah.
we've come a long way.
It's complicated. Okay, so
That's funny.
Kyla, you have a lot of different things going on at Nutritional Revolution in addition to one-on-one coaching. But tell us a little bit about that, and where can people find you? You actually have your own podcast.
And you teach on the socials every
Yeah.
day. You're dancing point a lot. I see it.
I need to record some new ones of those. So at Nutritional Revolution on our website, we have like
nutritionalrevolution.com.
Yes. Yeah. And we have pre-recorded like webinar content for talking about low energy availability. We have some webinar content on that. We have loads of different meal plans and recipe books for people looking, whether it's for pre and post fueling, like homemade, like real food ideas. If they're looking for more preppable things to get the nutrition on track on the weekends and stay prepared during the week, we have options for that as well. And then of course we have our one-on-one services, and and then also doing a little contract work on the side for a hydration company to help bring out a new fueling product that you might see at the bike club one day. So we'll see.
And what about the socials? Where can people find you there?
Oh, yes, at Nutritional Revolution on Instagram. I don't have a Twitter. And I think
then
that we have a Facebook. Yeah.
What's the name of your podcast?
Nutritional Revolution. Yeah.
Okay,
We like to interview researchers and athletes and talk about how they fuel, and then researchers on different, whether it's, hydration and cooling techniques, things like that. I'm fascinated by. So I think it's so fun.
It's true. And I just want everyone to know out there, if you're using Kyla as a performance guide, she has been testing extensively on our local community bike club, and she knows everything she knows because she works with elite athletes every Saturday of our house. And I just want to say you're welcome for all that information.
We're so elite, Kyla. You're welcome. You're welcome.
You guys are.
Okay, well,
you guys are the real pros.
Kyla, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
No problem. Thank you guys so much for having me.
You're the best.